The mansion is silent now. No light leans down through leaded glass windows, and shadows move like dark wings over old stone columns and weathered brick. Thin chimneys, cold as forgotten fires, rise above the rooftops. There is no one home. Within, there is only more silence and suspended time and abandoned elegance. There is no sound. Whoever lived here has long gone away, distant wanderers, now in worlds we cannot know. But there are moments when time seems to retreat, when the seasons fall away, when we feel the presence of those whose lives this house embraced. We sense that they are close by. We hear the echo of their voices, their laughter, their footfall, their heartbeat. There is no one home in the old mansion now. Or is there someone here? This is the story of the people who built and dwelled in this old house. Lives in many ways larger than life. Legendary lives. Lives that shaped an era and a city. Here, then, are the lives that linger still in the echoes and shadows of Thistle Hill. They came west with a dream, a gambler's spirit, and a will of iron. Young men with nothing to lose but their lives. There was land out here on the rolling prairie, a fortune to be made if you could somehow survive the impossible odds. Vast solitudes, bitter winters, summer drought, the cruel blades and arrows of renegade Indians, cattle thieves, wolves and rattlesnakes, and 1,000 ways to die. Few survived or had the luck and strength to see their dream made real. His name was Daniel Wagner. He came to the wild frontier in 1854 and homesteaded on a 160-acre grant, saved enough money to buy 242 head of longhorn cattle and 6 horses. He had a son named Tom, also known as W.T. Together they bought land at less than $1 an acre, leased additional grassland from the great Comanche chief Quanah Parker. In less than 30 years, they had expanded their 3D spread to over 1 million acres. Their cattle ranged over a half-dozen counties. It was the largest cattle operation in Texas. Tom and Ella Wagner had a daughter. They named her Electra. The Wagners possessed several fabulous ranch houses in their far-flung empire, but the most famous was a mansion called El Castillo. This 16-room castle in Decatur, Texas, was one of the grandest mansions in the West. Although Electra grew up in such luxurious surroundings, she could ride and shoot like an Indian. At 15, she was sent east to finishing school. She returned a beautiful young lady, cultured, but with a boundless zest for living life with abundant abandon. Her social life, her parties, her escapades became legendary. She was known as the Princess of the Panhandle. 18-year-old Electra fell in love with a Dallas lumberman. Tom and Ella sent her away on a world tour, perhaps some say to put a little distance between their daughter and a less than suitable suitor. Electra took Europe and much of the rest of the world by storm. In Nepal, she fell in love again, this time with Albert Wharton of Philadelphia. She returned to Texas with a brand new lover on her arm and an outrageous butterfly tattooed on her leg. Electra and Albert Wharton were married in 1902. Electra's trousseau was specially ordered from Paris. Her wedding veil was of rose point lace created for a member of the Habsburg nobility, valued at more than $10,000. What does a father who has everything give as a wedding gift to the daughter who also has everything? In 1902, the finest architects and builders and artisans in Texas were commissioned to build a mansion. In those days, it was customary for the great cattle barons to have a second house in town. High on a bluff above Fort Worth and the Trinity River, along what was called Silkstocking Row, were the elegant, often palatial homes of the region's most successful and wealthy citizens. And it was here, at the end of Summit Avenue, that Tom built for his daughter a honeymoon cottage, the magnificent mansion called Thistle Hill. The 18-room colonial revival mansion was built at a cost of $40,000, a sum equivalent to well over $1 million today. No expense was spared on the interior, where the foyer was dominated by a massive yet graceful horseshoe-shaped grand staircase. The walls, wainscoting, and ceiling panels were fashioned of exotic hardwoods, custom cut in St. Louis. Master artisans created the library with its leaded glass bookcases and elaborate stenciling on the walls. The formal parlor or drawing room featured elaborate woodwork of oak and mahogany. On the first floor were 5 fireplaces, each architecturally unique, first burning coal, then natural gas. Thistle Hill was built in a brief era of technological transition. The rooms were equipped with both gas and electric lighting to embrace both the old technology and the new. The house was also wired with an electric actuator system for the calling of servants to various rooms of the mansion. This recognition of both old and new was also reflected in the carriage house. Here were housed the magnificent Wharton horses, but here was also the home of some of the first automobiles in the city, leading to the establishment of the first automobile dealership. An innovative block and tackle system fed hay to the horses, and a newfangled gasoline pump fed fuel to the automobiles. Electra and her husband Albert took possession of Thistle Hill in 1904, and soon Electra resumed her passion for lavish, often outrageous living. For years, the house was alive with glamorous entertainment and a spirit of almost constant celebration. On holidays, laughter rang through the corridors like clarion bells, and from the lawns and balconies, fireworks scattered diamonds into the night sky. Electra filled her closets with furs and fine gowns, and some say more than 350 pairs of shoes. On one shopping spree to Neiman Marcus, she spent $20,000 in a single day, in a time when a nice house costs less than $2,500. Although Electra lived her life largely in the public eye, close friends revealed that beneath the public image, Electra possessed a warm and generous spirit. She was known for acts of kindness, especially toward children and those less fortunate than herself. Yet Electra lived large in this house. Her spirit burned brightly, and in time, far too soon, the flames would consume her. Christmas 1909. Tom Waggoner gave his children $6 million worth of land, cattle, and horses. Each of the 3 ranches encompassed 100,000 acres. Electra and Albert moved their family to their new ranch home, located in Vernon, Texas, about 100 miles northwest of Fort Worth. It was called Zacawista. Within a month, oil was discovered on the ranch land. Initially, Tom Waggoner was disappointed. He wanted water, not oil, and he had the wells sealed over. But eventually, oil would increase Electra's wealth beyond measure. In addition to the house in Vernon, the family would build a mansion in 1919 in Dallas, in a new and exclusive enclave called Highland Park. And at Thistle Hill, a whole new chapter was to begin. Winfield Scott came to Texas in 1870. While making a living chopping wood along the Trinity, he watched cowboys driving their herds across the river. This was the life he wanted. He saved enough money to buy 160 acres of land and then borrowed $500 to purchase cattle. Although it was said that Winfield Scott could neither read nor write, he was well on his way to becoming a cattle baron. He would soon amass one of the West's great fortunes. In 1884, Winfield met Elizabeth Simmons, socialite daughter of a Weatherford, Texas physician. Although it seemed they were from two separate social worlds, they were married within a year. In 1889, the Scotts decided to move to Fort Worth. The town was booming. New buildings were rising on nearly every block, including an opera house and the spectacular Spring Palace. Electric lights glittered like stars along the avenues, and rail cars were powered by electricity rather than mules. It was the perfect location for a cattleman, banker, real estate entrepreneur like Winfield Scott, and he would soon own much of the downtown. He was also drawn to Fort Worth by the news that his friends, the Whartons, had offered their home for sale. In 1911, Winfield Scott, now the largest builder and investor in Texas, purchased Thistle Hill for $90,000. Before moving into the mansion, the Scotts embarked on a massive remodeling project. Much of the colonial revival architecture and decorative elements, so loved by Electra, were stripped away and replaced by a more formal Georgian revival style. No two women could have been more different than Electra Wharton and Elizabeth Scott, and this disparity of personality and taste was reflected in the changes Elizabeth made in the mansion. Electra was flamboyant. Elizabeth was sophisticated, mannered, serene. While Electra once fired a 6-gun over the heads of her dinner guests, Elizabeth was known for her love of formal table settings, fine crystal, and expensive lines of china. In addition to an almost complete transformation of the mansion's interior, the Scotts made dramatic changes to the exterior and the grounds. The wood shingle roof was replaced with green terracotta tile. Balconies were removed, and other spaces were enclosed to create a solarium. Elaborate gardens, a pergola, and tea house were added. The remodeling dragged on for 9 months, and then sadly, just before they were to move into the mansion, Winfield Scott died. Elizabeth moved into the great labyrinth of rooms where she would live alone for the next 27 years. She lived quietly at Thistle Hill. Occasionally, she entertained close friends, hosted luncheons, worked in her beloved garden. Together with the other women of Silk Stocking Row, Elizabeth led the effort to bring art and culture to the city. She made annual shopping trips to New York and several times to Europe, where she purchased furnishings for the mansion. For years, she was active in the social life of the city. But in time, it seemed she withdrew more and more into the empty rooms of the great house. For a while, her son Winfield Jr. lived with her, but he was little comfort. By 1925, he had squandered a fortune of over $3 million, was deep in debt, and was divorcing the first of his 8 wives. Elizabeth also must have been saddened in this year of 1925 with news that Electra, the first mistress of Thistle Hill, had died at the age of 43. Finally, the flame that burned so brightly had consumed itself and gone out. The years passed, but within the old mansion, it seemed time stood still. Outside, the city was racing headlong into the future. Elizabeth's health began to fail. Then in 1938, after a lingering illness, Elizabeth Scott, the second mistress of Thistle Hill, passed away. Winfield Jr., her wastrel son, sold the mansion for little more than $17,000. In years to come, he would sell off the remainder of the Scott properties, be charged with drug smuggling, serve time in Leavenworth Penitentiary, then die in debt and disgrace. For 2 years, the mansion stood empty. Then in 1940, Thistle Hill was purchased by the Girls' Service League and made into a dormitory for the young women from out of town who had come to the city to work in defense plants. After the war, the mansion was used for various Girls' Service League functions. Eventually, in 1968, the mansion was put up for sale. For 7 years, the grand old mansion was occupied only by pigeons and memories. Its interior had suffered during its years as a dormitory. Many of its most elegant features had been painted over or removed. Its gardens, long since neglected and overgrown. The rooms dusty and frosted with cobwebs. The once exclusive neighborhood had been zoned commercial, and many of the silk-stocking mansions became victims of the wrecking ball. It seemed only a matter of time before the wrecking crews would come to Thistle Hill. Then, in 1975, an alliance of preservationists, business and civic leaders, and interested citizens organized a Save the Scott Home campaign. And just when it seemed the mansion was doomed, enough funds were raised to purchase the house and begin restoration. Over the next several years, much of Thistle Hill was restored to its former glory. The grand old mansion was given new life in the old neighborhood that is now home to most of the city's hospitals. And we wonder about old houses and the power they have to tell a very human story. A story of a time when giants walked the prairie, and great fortunes could be carved from the wilderness, and cities could be built where none had been before. But mostly, here it is the story of two families, the Wagoners and the Scotts, and especially two women, Electra and Elizabeth, two extraordinary women who lived and loved and dreamed within these walls for nearly half a century. It is morning now. The sun is rising on the old mansion. It seems that no one is home. Or is there someone here?